collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, helping young unemployed graduates. The Chambers of Commerce on both sides in Cyprus are jointly promoting an innovative bicommunal internship programme.
This specific internship scheme has something special. It's not only about learning how to do their job properly, but it also having the experience to work in the other community.
We learn all about fintech from the principal economist at the EU Commission's Directorate General for the Internal Market and Entrepreneurship.
That is very disruptive because it not only adds to existing markets, it disrupts markets and creates very new markets. And we see a high potential for these companies in the long term, but in the short term we need to understand the technology and its applications and make sure that we govern it politically in a correct way.
And just in time for Christmas, a new book on the wildlife of Cyprus.
We always wanted the photographs integrated in the text, so every photo is in the section which describes the animal, so people can very easily see what they're reading about.
The Cyprus Chamber of Commerce and the Turkish Cypriot Chamber of Commerce have announced the launch of a second round of an internship programme which will see young unemployed Greek and Turkish Cypriots work in each other's communities. This is on the back of the fact that they've already done one of these internships, apparently very successfully. Kemal Bicommunal is Deputy Secretary General of the Turkish Cypriot Chamber of Commerce. Leonidas Paschalidis is Senior Director of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Leonidas, let's start with that first one. How did it go?
The first round, where we had 12 Turkish Cypriots, young unemployed graduates, placed in Greek Cypriot companies, and also 12 Greek Cypriots placed in Turkish Cypriot companies, was extremely successful. This was ascertained by the companies that participated in the scheme, but also by the interns as well. And because of the success of the first round, we call it the first round now, Rosie, because there's a second round. At the beginning there was only going to be one round. But because of this success, we have managed to do some reshuffling with the budget of the project, which is co-financed by the European Commission. So with their approval, we shifted money from one budget line to another, so that we have the chance now to do a second round. And this round will involve 8 Greek Cypriots working for 3 months for Turkish Cypriot companies, and correspondingly 8 Turkish Cypriots working for Greek Cypriot companies.
How did the interns of the first round react? I presume you got feedback from them as well as from the employers.
Correct. You see, this specific internship scheme has something special. It's not only about learning how to do their job properly, but it also having the experience to work in the other community. So I think for people who have not necessarily having the chance to mingle and socialize with the other community, I think it was a great opportunity. And this is one of the aspects why they were fascinated by the experience, because they kept telling us that they made friends, their families have visited the working place, and they have continued their friendship after that. So I think this aspect was also particularly interesting for the people, for the youngsters.
And who were the youngsters? They were graduates, but were they diverse in their experience and their qualifications?
In their experience and qualifications, yes, they were diverse. But we should admit that they were mainly Nicosia-based, which were making things quite limited only to Nicosia for practical reasons. Imagine that you're a Greek Cypriot living in Paphos, so you wouldn't be able to come to north daily and go back, commute back and forth to be able to do something in Kyrenia or northern part of the city of Nicosia. So that could be a problem that we have faced. But apart from that, yes, there were students coming from all backgrounds and all walks of life. Of course, we are talking about youngsters in a specific age range and who have not necessarily had a lot of experience in their fields.
When they had finished, was there any opportunity for them to continue in paid employment in the companies that they worked for?
Yes, I mean, the scheme itself encourages that, but of course you realize that we cannot oblige an employer, because after the 3-month term finishes, we should tell you, Rosie, that for those 3 months, the project is paying, let's call it an honorarium, it's not really a salary, 500 euros per month. Now, after the 3 months internship finishes, then it will be the employer that is going to pay. We had one success story in this respect from the first cycle, whereby a Greek Cypriot company has offered full-time employment to the Turkish Cypriot girl who was hosted there as an intern, and she's still there working full-time with them.
On a proper salary?
On a proper salary, yes. We also had a lot of interest from both companies and interns if we could extend their internship for another 3 months or even, but you realize because our resources, financial resources, are limited, we couldn't really do that. We are hoping that we're going to have more success stories out of the second cycle of the project.
One other positive impact was the fact that after completing their internships, they put it on their CVs and they gave them an extra inch when they were going to interviews in other companies. Having this kind of internship in a different environment actually helped them their interviews, and this is the other feedback that we have received from them. And a couple of them were employed their own community later, but using the experience that they learned from this experience.
What sort of jobs did they do?
Well, it depends. You see, the two chambers, we are always trying to accommodate the interns in line with their wishes. So, if somebody says, I want to work, for example, in a marketing department, because they have to fill in a form and they give us this information, we do our best to find a company that can give this marketing opportunity to the intern. I mean, we are not going to say, okay, you want to work in marketing, but we don't have such a company on our cards, so you work in, I don't know, production in some other company. So we try to accommodate, if you like, their wishes.
And did you manage to meet all the expectations?
I think we did to a very good extent, Kemal, yes, in the first round.
In a great extent, in the sense that Cyprus as a whole is not necessarily a very big industrialist country with too many diverse jobs. I mean, it wasn't possible to employ anybody in the aero or space sector, for example. But just to give you a couple of examples, there was this one intern who was interned at the creative sector in the movie making. There was a little movie making company in the north. And there was consultancy companies, marketing companies,
travel agencies,
there were
auditing firms.
So can I just ask you, when you open a round, like say the second round, who can apply and what is required of them in order for you to see their applications, and then presumably you get more applications than you do have openings. So how do you make a selection?
Right. I will tell you who can apply, and my friend Kemal will tell you how we make the selection. Okay, anybody can apply, as long as they are Cypriots, as long as their age is between 20 and 35 years of age, as long as they are unemployed, graduates. And as long, of course, as long as they can communicate in the English language.
Yes,
that's the criteria for the interns. For the companies now, the criteria again, that they should speak at least English so that they can communicate with their interns. They should be based in Cyprus, either in the Greek Cypriot community or the Turkish Cypriot community. They need to be in existence for at least 5 years, and they should employ at least 3 people full-time. Why this? Because when you have a startup, a very new company with 1 or 2 people, they cannot really give a lot of experience, if you like, to the interns. So, as long as companies and interns meet these criteria, they can apply under the scheme.
And how is the selection
In
made?
the application form, we ask them to write them about their background, their studies, and then their preferential areas of work. So not necessarily they are all expected to write something about their backgrounds. They might be interested to their internship in another field. So we were collecting all those information on the application forms, and based on first come, first served principle, we are checking each and every one of them whether we'll be able to find the match with a company in our list. And at times we were even getting out because we are chambers, using our members, using our network and contacts, even calling them, look, I have this guy who's or a girl who's interested in this, so would you be interested in interning that person? And then generally the answers were positive, and this is the procedures that we've been following.
So you're launching the second round. It means you need applications from as many people as possible. What's the deadline?
Yeah, we announced it, as I said, Rosie, on the 5th of December, and it is open for applications until the 5th of January next year.
And where can people find the application forms?
The applications, they can find them on the websites of both chambers, or even more easily than that, they can give us a telephone call. I'm going to give the number of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce and Industry, 2288 9840. And
the Turkish Cypriot Chamber?
And the Turkish Cypriot Chamber, it is 2283760.
So there you have it. If you're a graduate, you're unemployed, and you'd like a different work experience, an internship for 3 months, get in touch before the 5th of January.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the 4th series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Fintech is a phrase that we hear increasingly frequently. When I was in Brussels recently, I caught up with Joachim Schwerin. He's the principal economist for Cosmi Financial Instruments at the Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs of the European Commission. And I asked him how he would define fintech.
Fintech can be defined very simply by saying that it is the application of technology to financial markets. We have basically 2 groups of fintech applications. There are those applications that complement existing markets, like ATM machines, or like, let's say, trading on the internet when you do things with your bank on the internet. That is fintech, but it is very simple fintech, which just makes things more efficiently, but it doesn't disrupt markets.
So basically you're talking about it in terms of technology in the finance sector.
That is technology in the finance sector, but the second group of fintech is more interesting because that is based on technology actually that disrupts financial markets and which goes beyond the financial markets and also touches the real economy. And I give you examples for that. So, for example, we have the cryptocurrencies, which started with Bitcoin in 2008. At the moment, we have about 600 cryptocurrencies in Europe. Virtual currencies with which you can trade goods and services, but where you are outside the traditional banking system and where you can give access to loans, for example, to very small enterprises that do not get loans from their banks. We also have what is very exciting, distributed ledger-based technology, so blockchain. Blockchain is the technology, the protocol that underlies Bitcoin but now finds application in many other fields, and that is not only in the financial sphere but also in the real economy. For example, you will have heard of the Internet of Things, and that is based on distributed ledger technology, when devices not only come together to exchange information, but when you have a system where you can trade goods and services basically across border at very short time frames with very little cost and safely because you have an encrypted system. That is very disruptive because it not only adds to existing markets, it disrupts markets and creates very new markets. And we see a high potential for these companies in the long term, but in the short term we need to understand the technology and its applications and make sure that we govern it politically in a correct way, allowing innovation to take place on the markets without regulating prematurely and preventing innovation.
So what sort of effect, though, is this going to have on what we refer to as traditional banking, for example, and the whole capitalist system?
The effect is a very profound system because what fintech essentially does is it brings the two market sides, demand and supply, much closer together than before. We see a disintermediation, which means that all the financial intermediaries which sit between the person that has money and the person that wants money are squeezed out in a way. They will not disappear, but they need to become more efficient in what they do, so that you have a much more direct and dynamic interaction between the person that has money and the person that wants money. This creates speed and efficiency. It allows that there is a greater interest by the person who invests in the company because the person who invests gets directly into touch with the company, knows what the investment is for, can ask questions, can get involved, and therefore has a higher incentive to invest in the first place. We see, therefore, the great chance that the capital that has so far been unused, because we do not have a shortage in capital in Europe, but we have a problem with matching the supply and demand side, will be activated and will be put to efficient use. That can take place outside the banking system. Much of fintech is taking place outside the banking system, but also the banks, after a certain period of denial, are now moving into the system because they understand that they can have merits too if they become more efficient in their transactions. But it is certainly the case that much of what we have been discussing here, blockchain applications and others, will be very interesting for applications on public capital markets, on other markets, and that probably takes place outside the banking system.
We're basically talking, aren't we, about artificial intelligence and about the fact that computer algorithms and all sorts of other things could actually impact the way all of us not just do business, but the way we live.
That is also something that is already taking place, and that is something where opportunities and risks have to be weighed very carefully. You have that situation already now when you have automated trading, so when computer programs essentially trade shares or securities with each other based on initial conditions that you have put into the system. That can be efficient, but that also raises, of course, problems of control when these systems interact without any more human control for reasons that we perhaps do not know. That is a general development which we have in all sorts of societal applications. You not only have that in the sphere of finance, you also have that in other areas like self-driving cars, where automated systems will take over. And the underlying philosophical question which needs to be addressed by society and which is extremely important is what power would we like to give to those automated systems, and what element of human control do we need to preserve in order to keep controlling the system? Because at the end of the day, much of what we are constructing in terms of Internet of Things, in terms of artificial intelligence, will be in a position to work on itself without any human interaction any longer. And that, of course, creates an immense impact on our societies that can not only be looked at from a regulatory perspective, but that needs to be also discussed from a philosophical perspective.
It's actually quite scary. If anybody tries to stop me driving and lets the car do it for me, I'll kill them. But it's fascinating stuff. If you've got thoughts about it, get in touch with us.
Get in touch with the Cyprus News Digest by emailing cyprusnewsdigest@gmail.com.
Christmas is coming and, well, it's rather big for a stocking filler, I think, but An Introduction to the Wildlife of Cyprus is a new book that's just out, edited by David Sparrow and Eddie John. One of the contributors on dragonflies is Ros Sparrow, who joins us now. Ros, how did this book come about?
It's been 6 years in the making, really. My husband David and I have both been photographing the wildlife of Cyprus for, well, almost 12 years. And he first published a book on reptiles and amphibians. But while researching that, it seemed to him that there was a lack of a good book which covered all the wildlife. And rather than complaining about not having a book like that, he thought he ought to try and make one. So I remember saying to him at the time, "Don't you think this is rather ambitious? Are you sure you want to do it?" And he said, yes, we do. So, yes, it then grew and grew. We were initially expecting maybe 450 pages, but it's come up to almost 900, with 44 authors contributing.
And loads of colour photographs. I mean, that's what people really need if they're going to identify wildlife, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. We always knew the photographs would be very important. And we managed to get 107 photographers contributed photos to us, because David and I only focus on a few groups of animals, so we needed a lot of help, and people have been marvellous.
So tell us a little bit about the layout of the book. Have you divided it up into types of wildlife, or how have you done it?
It's structured based on the traditional orders of taxonomy, which is the way that animals are scientifically classified. So we've got chapters on all the different animal orders, and it starts with invertebrates like insects and snails, and even earthworms are in there, spiders and crabs and prawns and things. And then we come to the vertebrates, which are the amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. And throughout, we always wanted the photographs integrated in the text, so every photo is in the section which describes the animal, so people can very easily see what they're reading about.
It looks like it's quite a big book. It's more a coffee table book, isn't it? Or could you take it out with you if you were on the hunt?
We think people would have it in the car. You certainly wouldn't carry it around in a rucksack, that's for sure. It's a reference book. It's not the sort of full format size that coffee table books sometimes tend to be. It's more of a library reference book size, so you can hold it in the hand, but of course it's quite a heavy book.
Yeah, sure, with all those pages and all those photographs. So you did the dragonfly bit. What's your fascination with dragonflies?
The way this started was that we couldn't find anyone to do the dragonfly chapter. We asked a series of people who all had to be flying for one reason or another, and eventually we contacted an expert in Belgium who said that if David wrote that chapter, he would be glad to guide us and supervise it, which we thought was a wonderful opportunity. And we were keen on dragonflies anyway. They're very attractive and lovely things to watch. We really started studying them seriously about 4 years ago.
Right, what about, you say you brought together 107 photographers. Did you actually say, we want photographs of this, this and this? Or did you already have contacts among the many wildlife photographers we've got in Cyprus?
We had a lot of contacts already, and then they had contacts, of course. So I think word gradually spread, particularly that we needed bird photographs because we don't specialise in birds at all, and mammals. Well, we had a very good contact on mammals, so it just grew in a rather haphazard fashion, but over the years we managed to get photos of probably all the species that anyone's likely to see.
Is there anything missing from the book?
There are lots of things missing because the research just hasn't been done. For instance, we're very conscious on bees and wasps. Cyprus has a lot of wild species of bees and wasps, some of which are very attractive, but not that much research has been done on them. So we've been able to cover all the families, and often we know which genus a species belongs to, but in some orders there are hundreds or thousands of species and you can't possibly cover them all.
I guess that in terms of photographing things like insects, that's a very different talent, if you like, than it is if you go out and photograph a mouflon.
Yes, it is very different, which is why I suppose it needed so many people to be involved. Over the years, going out in the field, and we also run a group and give talks about nature, so over the years we've just made a lot of contacts who share our interests and made a lot of friendships in the field as well, really. So we were able to find people who specialise in different kinds of animals.
If you leave aside the dragonflies, have you got a favourite?
Well, we love butterflies too. There's a beautiful butterfly called the two-tailed pasha. Actually, we had a very exciting trip a few days ago because we found the plain tiger, about 6 of them, and that's quite rarely seen. In fact, in all these years, it's the first time I've managed to photograph any, so I was very excited about that. And that's a really beautiful butterfly.
Well, all of this is in the introduction to the wildlife of Cyprus, edited by David Sparrow and Eddie John. We've been talking to Ros Sparrow, who's one of the contributors. It's a hardcover book. It's in English. 897 pages, including photos, tables, graphs and maps. The price, €65 if it's cased, 60 without the case. Ros Sparrow, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Cypriot voters go to the polls on Sunday for the municipal elections. Originally, the Interior Ministry had suggested that these elections be postponed so that they could be held at the same time as elections for the European Parliament in May 2019. In the end, Parliament decided it didn't agree, and so the Ministry withdrew the bill and has now put forward one which will mean that those elected on Sunday will only serve half of their 5-year term, and the next elections will be held at the same time as the European Parliament, thereby saving a considerable amount of money for the taxpayer. And the taxpayer should be looking very carefully at what goes on in the municipalities. The Auditor General has released some startling figures in the last few months, but one thing is certain: it's rather an anomaly in Cyprus that we actually pay for the upkeep of 39 municipalities, an extraordinary number for an island the size of Cyprus. And of those 39, 9 don't even really exist because they're for areas that are under the Turkish occupation. So taxpayers are asking why exactly we continue to pay considerable wages and salaries to mayors of pretty well non-existent municipalities. The shocking figures show that, for example, the mayor of Famagusta receives over €40,000 a year. Those of Morphu and Kyrenia get 35. And let's not forget that all the municipal councillors also get their salaries from the taxpayer. But these will all be hotly contested seats in Sunday's election. As the Cyprus Mail commented, nice work if you can get it. And that's about it for this week's programme. We'll be taking a couple of weeks off over the holiday period, but I'll be back with you in 2017. Let me just wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy and peaceful